All right, everyone. Thank you so much for returning. And I apologize for slight delays here. I think I have to remember that we have to sort of pause a little more on Zoom to make sure questions can get out. I will certainly keep in mind the questions in our Q&A pod. We'll try and work through them throughout the day as well. So I might ask some panelists to take some of those questions you have. And certainly we over here at Washington State Council, I know we may be able to address some of those questions with you directly. Let me go ahead and introduce our next session here. The title of the session is Teaching Students the Fact-Checking Skills No One Taught Us. And I think this was, I will tell you again, just like as Jevin was glowing about Sean and Liz, Sean and Liz were really sort of inspiration for the theme this year. I attended their session back a couple of years ago at the fall conference, last in person when we had, and I was just blown away by their material and their process and their thinking, that I wanted to make sure that they got as broad a format and wide an audience as possible. Just a little bit about them. Liz Krause and Sean Lee are co-founders of the Teaching for an Informed Public. Liz has coordinated Miss Info Day and has worked with high school students and have co-hosted high school students and educators at the University of Washington Center for the Informed Public and Wazoo's Edward Murrow College for Communication. Along with Sean, she's the co-founder of the Teachers for an Informed Public, an organization that supports teachers, librarians, anyone who's bringing digital media literacy skills to students and their communities. Prior to that, Liz spent 6 years in the classroom working as an ESL teacher, language arts, and school librarian. Sean is currently teaching world history and government at Ballard High School in the Seattle Public School District. He and his students have actually hosted Miss Info J Junior, and so I'll talk to you more about these events that they have, where they teach their families and friends about digital literacy media skills. And as you'll find later in our program, those sort of personal connections and bridges are much of the way that we actually learn and share information. And so I want to welcome Liz and Sean, and thank you so much in advance as well for your presentation. Looking forward to it.
Excellent, thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, let me get shared.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending this morning. I know it's Saturday morning and it's the end of the first quarter for a lot of us. So, taking time out to do this is really great. Our workshop today is called Teaching Students the Fact-Checking Skills That No One Taught Us. And I really like this title here because no one did teach us how to operate in this media environment. It is so new, it is so evolving, but it is also so much a part of our life and our students' life, and it's really affecting us in so many ways. So we have a question here in the chat. Anybody who's already doing any media or information literacy work that or have resources that they like, if they could share those in the chat, that would be wonderful. We also, if you have a question during the seminar at any point, we ask you to put that in the Q&A, and we can get to those questions at the end of our session.
All right, I see one person. Shift and Control F, we'll talk about that later. So go ahead and if you have any resources you're already using, go ahead, keep putting those in the chat and we will get started. So hello, I am Liz Krause, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Miss Info Day coordinator at the UW Center for an Informed Public. And as Sean said, I'm a former teacher and school librarian. And if you are not familiar with Miss Info Day, it's an event that has been run for 3 years. It is now co-hosted by the Center for an Informed Public and the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at WSU. And it is in March every year. We have students, high school students and teachers and librarians come to campus for the day and learn from the faculty and librarians and grad students at UW how to combat and identify misinformation. And you'll see I'm circled at the front there, and Sean is circled at the back. He came to the first Miss Info Day event.
And Liz, who's up there on the podium?
Jevin.
Yeah, so there we are, right? Yeah, this is really how I came to the first Miss Info Day here, and I was super inspired by this work and really wanted to bring it back to my students here at Ballard. And I'm going to tell you how I did that and hopefully inspire you to do it as well. All right. Hey, hi. Hi, thanks for the hi. All right, I'm Sean Lee, and I teach world history and US government this year at Ballard High School in Seattle Public Schools. And I've done misinfo work for, gosh, about 3-4 years now. And I'm really super passionate about it. I'm really, really grateful that I got the time to spend with you today to talk about it. Liz and I are the co-founders of this organization, Teachers for an Informed Public. Yes, we are inspired by the UW Center for an Informed Public, and we host a workshop where we go through curriculum that Liz and I have created to teach media literacy, or rather information literacy skills to our students. We also have community meetings once a month. We meet on the first Monday of every month, and we do that via Teams or Zoom rather. And we connect teachers and librarians from across the state together, and we oftentimes have guest speakers from people who are doing this work throughout the country. And if you want more information, you can email us at tipteachers@gmail.com. We also have a website, tipteachers.net. So we hope that you will come and join us. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so our agenda today is I'm going to talk about Misinfo Day Junior and what I've done in my school, and hopefully inspire you to do a similar thing in your school or library. And we'll go through the digital survival skills curriculum. These are curriculum that we made to prepare students to do a Misinfo Day Junior. And as you see on the slide, I have a Montgomery flag, Uncle Sam right there. We are here to recruit you. So we hope that this will inspire you and will recruit you into this fight against digital misinformation. Because like Dr. West said, this is one of the most important problems of our time. If we cannot agree on the information, we cannot solve big problems. And we got big problems. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so Misinfo Day Junior. Like I said, I went to that first Misinfo Day and was so inspired. And I was like, how can I do this at my school? And I thought, well, we could invite other students from other schools to come and have high school students teach middle school students, and that could happen, but I haven't done that yet. But I really think where a lot of this misinformation is getting spread is from the older generations, from the parents, the students' parents and grandparents, people my age or my mom's age, who no one taught them how to operate in this information landscape. So to have their students teach these skills, I think is super powerful, because if little Billy presents something, grandma's going to listen and grandma's going to be pretty excited. So we've had workshops where students present information literacy skills, fact-checking skills, and have done live fact-checkings on live fact checks on online claims. And the image here is from our Misinfo night from 2020. As you see by the date, it was a few days right in front of the 2020 election. So I'll talk about that one in a little bit. Okay, so as I go through these slides, I would like you to think about what a Misinfo Day Junior at your school could look like. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so my first event was in June of 2019. And those of us who are in this room who teach an AP course, I was teaching an AP course at the time. My school, we go all the way to the end of June, but the AP course is at the beginning of May. So you have that time to fill, like, what are you going to do with those kids? And I created this media literacy unit to put there to fill that time. And then our end event was I had my AP students present to 9th graders on these topics here: confirmation bias, lateral reading, propaganda, and use of Wikipedia, and phone addiction. And we did this for they had 9 stations, and kids went from station to station and learned from their peers. It was really kind of cool first event that we had. Okay, next slide, please. The following year, and this was our first COVID year, so we were totally locked down, but I still had those AP students again. I still needed to find content. I wanted to make that time useful for them and important. And we had a Misinfo Day Junior online virtually. And we had Dr. West was generous enough with his time to come and give us a keynote address. And I had my students present on these media literacy skills in this kind of workshop, this Zoom kind of workshop, kind of like we're doing right now. And so we'd have a group of students share out and go from group to group, sharing out on these topics. And our next slide, please. And then our last one that we did last year, right before the election, this was our largest one ever. And like I said, it was right before the election. And my two US history classes, now not AP classes, on-level US history classes, 11th graders, and my two classes, my colleague Mr. Marine's two classes, and Ms. Dowdy's two classes. So we had 6 classes of US history students, and we had over 200 family members come. And we had breakout rooms and everything like that. And so parents would go to their rooms of their students' class and see the students do live fact checks on online claims. And we really baited the hook on this, right? It was right before the election. So it's like, we're gonna fact check claims on the election, on COVID, on Black Lives Matter protests. And we have a video example of this later. And you can see what the students came up with and what it looks like. And so we're gonna use this example to teach you how to do some of these fact checking skills. All right. All right, so now how do we get kids ready to do something like this, right? It seems pretty crazy, right? The technology is so ubiquitous, it's so powerful, it's all around us, but yet it's hard for us to get our handle on how we teach kids how to operate in this space. So I broke it down into 4 parts. First of all, the media and digital media, this stuff, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It is, as John Green says in the video, and as David Foster Wallace said in his famous joke, that it's the water we're swimming in. Fish don't have a word for water. So our first assignment is just to ask students to take a step back and really examine the kind of information and the kind of content that they are swimming in. The next assignment that we have them look at, and this is stuff, and when I get into this, is really came straight from the UW Misinfo Day, is confirmation bias. What confirmation bias is, how we all have it. Everyone wants to be confirmed. Everyone wants to be reinforced. And we will seek out information that confirms what we already believe. Now, if you add on top of that, the algorithms. Now, the algorithm will make sure that you get content that you already agree with over and over and over again. And that gets people siloed, and that gets people intolerant of other views. And this is just what these platforms are doing to us. They're giving us information to keep us engaged on their platform. That's what they want to do. So we have these things, the technology is ubiquitous. Our brains are hardwired to like misinformation, and the algorithm keeps feeding us misinformation or information that we really, really like. So what do we do about that? We can fact check it. And so teaching students, and by proxy their parents, fact checking skills, they can kind of stop and check themselves. All right, now I'm going to kind of go through some of the examples that we have here. Now here's an example of student work. I asked students to take the 20 most recent Instagram feeds, or the posts, what the most 20 posts on their Instagram was. And this was a couple years ago. It's still the prevalent platform for teenagers. TikTok's probably creeping, but whatever. So anyhow, this student looked at the 20 latest feeds on their social media platform, on their, just like I said, on this case, Instagram, and found that 20% of it was sports and 35% of it was memes, but only 6% of it was family and friends. And I asked the students to do a reflection after they organized this data. And this student said, you know, I get on these sites to stay connected with my friends, but most of the content I receive are from these memes or from our sports or things that are celebrity related. My connections to my friends is very small percentage of what I see, less than 10%. And this insight was also that we shared here in the slide. Since I get to choose who I follow, I'm essentially manipulating the information that I see and learn about. And I think this was very insightful for a teenager to see that his phone is not really a window on a world, it's more of a mirror of themselves. and kind of a fake funhouse mirror at that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so now that we established that the technology is ubiquitous and it's all over the place, and it's super powerful and fun, and really how we communicate in many ways, particularly teenagers, we need to kind of check ourselves and look at the kind of stuff that we're getting. So confirmation bias, we ask students to take a look at these two different headlines. One from The Guardian, drowned in sound, how listening to music hinders learning. Also, or 3 reasons why you should try studying while listening to music from Colorado State University online. And students who said they like to play music or have their AirPods in while they're studying will tend to click on the Colorado State piece, and people who do not will tend to click on the Guardian piece. Again, really illustrating how people want to be confirmed and will seek out information to confirm it. All right, now this is when we transition to algorithms, this is when it gets kind of supercharged. So the platforms know what you like, know who you are, and know who you like, know who you are, and will tailor content to you. All right, I see a comment came up there from Nancy. I do want to address that, and I will address that right now. I am a high school teacher, and most of my content is built for a high school audience. However, we do have a tip teacher who is an elementary school teacher. 4th grade, Liz?
4th and 5th, yeah.
4th and 5th grade, 4th and 5th grade librarian, and she created a misinfo day for her 4th and 5th graders, who really tailored the content down to serve them. So it can be done with elementary school students. And boy, I would love to see that happen. Really want to encourage that to happen. All right, so Liz, do I pass the baton to you here?
Sure.
Okay.
So one of the activities that we're going to do with students to get them exploring the algorithm and social media algorithms and thinking about what kind of content do they push, like what do they know about me, what's the quality of the content that I'm getting. We have developed this activity where you put in a search term in YouTube. So in this case, it was minimum wage. And in one of these feeds, I signed into YouTube and I searched minimum wage. And the other one is I brought up a browser, different browser. I didn't sign into YouTube, searched minimum wage, and then I compared the results. And the first like 3 or 4 results were the same video. And then after that, this is like results, I don't know, 4 to 7 or something, were, as you can see, completely different. So my question to you all, here's where we get a little interactive. Which feed do you think is mine that I signed into? Am I feed A or feed B? And go ahead and put your guess in the chat. Wow, a lot of feed A. Everybody. Okay, one person thinks B. All right, so this is, I wish I were feed A, because to me, feed A looks like more informational content. It's coming from like newspapers and publications that are trying to inform you. There's a crash course video trying to educate you. Unfortunately, YouTube does not think I want to be informed because I am feed B. They think I want to be entertained with 3 moves that made me a millionaire, or 6 minimum wage workers versus 1 secret millionaire. So that was a surprise to me to see the difference there. And it kind of made me think about, oh, what does the algorithm know about me? That like, why are they pushing these things? Why don't I get the actual informational stuff? So this is a fun activity that you can do with students, either having them log in if you're comfortable with that, and if your school devices allow YouTube, or if you don't, you can do this yourself and as the teacher, bring it to them and have them guess which one is yours, like we just did here, and then have a reflection on that. It's a good question. What 3 sites were in common? And I don't remember. I could go, I think I have screenshots, so I could go look, but I don't remember what the first 3 were. All right, so now that we've kind of laid out for students sort of what all the obstacles are in the information landscape to being well informed, what do we do about it? And we point to two resources that we really like for this like fact checking step and evaluating information step. And one of them is the Civic Online Reasoning curriculum from the Stanford History Education Group that maybe some of you are familiar with as history teachers. So they have a lot of great lessons and resources on the three questions you see on the screen there. And then the other thing that we're going to talk about for the next like 10 minutes is the SIFT method for evaluating information. Okay, and I see Sean's answered that question, so great. All right, so SIFT was developed, Jevin mentioned this in his talk, was developed by Mike Caulfield, digital literacy expert who was at Washington State for a long time, and now he's at the Center for an Informed Public. And the idea behind SIFT is that you can use the strategies it teaches to identify, to evaluate unfamiliar sources and to fact check claims really quickly, like in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. It happens fast. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. You can do this work pretty quickly. So, whoops, clicked on the thing there. Here we go. So in the spirit of Miss Info Day Junior, we are going to have two students teach you the steps of SIFT. We have a 5-minute video from them that was from the Miss Info night that Sean hosted. And so this is Ballard High School students, Amelia and Mia. And as you're watching, I want you to think about, they focus on the first 3 steps that are in the box here. So think about how are they investigating the source and what does it mean to find better coverage? And you should be able to hear, but let me know if you can't.
Misinformation Night by Amelia and Mia. Is hydroxychloroquine the cure for COVID?
After creating a Twitter account, we found this post from October 17th of this year. Our search term was hydroxychloroquine, which is an anti-malarial drug that there has been a lot of misinformation spread about, specifically how it can be used to treat COVID. This is one of the first posts that came up.
When looking at misinformation, we use the acronym SIFT, which means stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims, quotes, and media to the original content.
To the right is a post from Climate Realist linking an article from Sky News Australia, a conservative website, claiming that there is evidence supporting that hydroxychloroquine can be used to treat COVID-19. We need to stop and pause before sharing or retweeting the post to check that it's from a reputable source. When we share posts, they are circulated through our followers, thus creating echo chambers of information that might not be factual.
We investigated the source Sky News Australia and found that it has aired false news before. We also investigated the producer of Sky News, Rowan Dean, as he was linked on Sky News's Wikipedia article. Something that we found notable is that his background is in advertising and television presenting, not in journalism or the sciences. His title is a social commentator. We used Wikipedia to get a quick summary on Rowan Dean, and while Wikipedia is often seen as a site that has false information, it is great for quickly fact-checking, which we will talk about in a later slide.
After searching the term hydroxychloroquine COVID-19, we received numerous reputable sources saying that hydroxychloroquine has not been proven effective in treating COVID-19. The first source saying this came from the FDA. The second article that contradicted the Sky News article was from Johns Hopkins, which is one of the top medical universities in the country. The last article, which was specifically about COVID-19 misinformation, came from NPR, a well-known nonprofit media organization.
Twitter uses algorithms to suggest content to its users based on what subject areas they consistently look at and to update the site with the newest information. Since Twitter suggests tweets based on personal interests, if we express certain viewpoints, it will continue to recommend us posts that affirm pre-existing beliefs. It is important to be aware of our confirmation bias in order to challenge and further develop our views as we encounter new information. When you retweet a post, your followers are exposed to whatever information you are putting online. Therefore, they are more likely to retweet it or interact with it in general. If the people you are following and your followers are posting similar or the same content as you, it creates an echo chamber. This is especially harmful if it is misinformation that is being circulated.
There are different strategies and tips we can use to eliminate the possibility of consuming and sharing misinformation. Tip 1. Use Wikipedia. While Wikipedia is often seen as an untrustworthy site that has false information, it is great for fact-checking websites and people. We can use it to get short summaries, which can help us find information like how long a website/news platform has been around, what awards they have won, and much more. Tip 2. If there is a piece of information that doesn't look trustworthy or that makes you stop, open multiple tabs when searching. When fact-checking, it is a good idea to look at multiple sites and cross-check to see if the information aligns among them.
This example is significant because it is spreading misinformation about a very serious topic. People's lives are at risk and they need accurate information to ensure their safety. The FDA has cautioned against using hydroxychloroquine not only because it hasn't been proven effective in numerous studies, but also because it can lead to serious heart issues, blood and lymph system disorders, kidney injuries, and liver problems and failure. It is incredibly harmful to have tweets being spread that say otherwise, because oftentimes people don't look further into where the information is coming from.
Coming up, does the widespread use of masks protect from COVID? By Zach, Isa, Sakai, and Allison.
And I see some talk about Wikipedia, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. So hold those thoughts. All right, so me and Amelia taught you SIFT. So I want to just show you kind of what it would look like to see what they did on the browser, and also talk about how did they investigate their source, which in this case was Sky News Australia. And before we talk about what they did do, I want to talk about what they did not do. So they did not like click the link in the tweet, go to that article and read through it, or go to that website. So that is probably what we would have told students to do in the past as a first step. We would have said, go to the source and check it out. So be reading it up and down the page. The Stanford History Education Group calls this vertical reading. You're looking at the title, you're seeing if there's an author, you're reading the article, maybe you're looking for sources. And when people do that, they generally think about, does the site look good? Maybe they read the about page or about section. They think about, does this information sound plausible to me? They maybe do some close reading where they're looking for, is the author supporting their points with evidence? What kind of sources are they using? And most of those things are excellent things to do on a site that is a good faith site that's trying to inform you. But if you're on an unfamiliar site that you've never heard of before, you don't know anything about them. So you don't know if they deserve that much of your attention and that much of your like close reading. So before we go to that site, what we are advocating for now is first, research the site's reputation on other sources. And the Stanford History Education Group calls this lateral reading. So you're not reading up and down one website, you're reading across sources, opening multiple tabs to get an idea of what do other sources say about this one. So how did they investigate? They didn't go to the article. What they did first was they used Wikipedia. And I'm also going to show you this new thing that we can do as well. So I'm going to open up Sky News Australia, this article, and instead of reading it, I'm going to go ahead and take off everything but the like main URL, Wikipedia. And I get that first. I'm going to click on that. And we learn Sky News Australia is an Australian 24-hour conservative cable and satellite channel, da 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 da. So conservative channel from Australia. And does the fact that a website is conservative or liberal mean that we automatically cross it off and like discredit it as a source? No, definitely not. But it's something that we consider as we're evaluating. Another thing you can do in the Wikipedia page for a source is see if there has been some relevant like thing that has happened around the topic that you're looking at. So in this case, it was COVID. So if we do a Command F search for COVID, and it brings us to, in this case, a section on a YouTube ban where Sky News Australia was banned from YouTube for 1 week from uploading new content because they were spreading COVID-19 misinformation. So in this case, that's a red flag for us because we're looking at a COVID post. So this is the kind of stuff that Amelia and Mia did. They said they also researched Rowan Dean because he was the one featured in the video they were looking at. And they got this idea that like, is this the best source for me to learn about COVID and hydroxychloroquine? Probably not. There's probably a better source out there. And I want to show you, so that's what we would teach students to do. Recently, sort of recently, I think this actually happened in February, Google has added now to your search results, these 3 dots next to a source. So if we just did a search for Sky News Australia and we click on those 3 dots, it brings up the Wikipedia information right there on your search page, which I think is pretty exciting because it's just streamlining the process, less typing, less clicks to get where you need to go. So they will bring up the first like paragraph or first few sentences, and then you can always click the Wikipedia to go and read more about the whole thing. And I'll just kind of show you, in most cases, the first 3 sentences probably won't be enough for you to get a good feel of the source. You're going to want to go read the page, maybe look at some of the sources that Wikipedia is citing. But in some cases, it really does give you enough, especially if you're looking at a source that is just kind of straight junk news and like known as that. So Natural News is one example where if I click this, I'm told right away, Natural News, anti-vax conspiracy theory and fake news website promoting medicine, pseudoscience, etc. So I could read more, but from that, I'd be like, okay, that's not my best source, probably. All right, so we are going to go back here. And Sean is going to talk a little bit about Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia. So like we brought it up and it hit right into the chat. So people are kind of fired up on this and for good reason. I am, when I first got into the education game, the mantra was to students, don't use Wikipedia. Anyone can edit it. It's unreliable. And then what did students do? They went and used Wikipedia. And what do we all do? We all go and use Wikipedia. While that was true about Wikipedia being a vast open source, a kind of wild west of information, back in 2010 or 2005, Wikipedia has grown up quite a bit in the last 10 years or so. And so it is recommended by the Stanford History Education Group to use Wikipedia to fact check claims. Crash Course in their wonderful series, Navigating Digital Information, has an episode about Wikipedia. That's a great resource. I'm going to throw that in the chat as soon as I'm done chatting, but go watch that after we're done, all right? Or after you're done with the conference today. And then there's another post here on the Washington Post. And I believe the comment said, that Wikipedia has a left bias or what have you. I don't know if I can't confirm or deny anything like that, but it is manufactured by people and people have biases, right? And I think really what we want our students to get is to really know what their biases are. And so they can identify when they're being reconfirmed, when they're getting put into information silos, and then to also recognize what these sources are and what their reputation is and what their motivations are. So really, when we engage in now the wild west of the information landscape, really knowing who you are and what you believe in, or what these sources are and what their motivations are, that's a super, super powerful thing that we can teach our students how to do and teach ourselves how to do. All right, so that's what I got to say about Wikipedia.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
All right, so now we're going to turn it over to you to practice this. We're going to give you 2 minutes. You may not need the whole 2 minutes, but I say go ahead and take it and see everything you can learn. So this is a Instagram post that was going around recently with the new news that the vaccine is open to 5 to 11-year-olds. So this post says, in a few short days, the FDA will likely recommend Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children as young as 5, even though, according to CDC data, children are 107 times more likely to die from the vaccine than from COVID. And the source for this is the Children's Health Defense. And right now, I want you to forget about the claim. I'm not asking you to look at this claim, this 107 times more likely. I want you to investigate the source, Children's Health Defense. So use Wikipedia. You can use other sites as well, but I'd say go to Wikipedia first to investigate them. And don't put anything in the chat yet. Give people a chance to do this. What do you learn that impacts your opinion of their trust? That's okay, Corey. What do you learn that impacts your opinion of their trustworthiness on the topic of COVID-19 vaccines for children? So I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. Go see what you can find. And I'm noticing the time, so I may stop us at 1 minute here, or a little over a minute. So 3 dots, yeah. I was so excited about that. I just found out about it like 2 weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure it's been there since February. And the only thing that I've kind of thought that I would like caution about those is a lot of times those like few sentences will be helpful, but a lot of times you'll need to read more. And I just like cautioning students, like go read a little more about it too. Okay. So we had our, go ahead and put in the chat what you found if you haven't yet. So founded and led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right, who is a known anti-vax. Yep. Yeah, and his Instagram was blocked repeatedly for COVID-19 problems. So a lot of red flags showing up there where you're thinking, okay, this is not a good source on COVID vaccines. So I need to find a better source to see if this claim, because just because they're not a good source doesn't necessarily mean the claim's wrong, right? So we got to find a better source. So going back to Mia and Amelia's example, what does it mean to find better coverage? Better equals more credible for the topic you're researching. So in Mia and Amelia's case, this was hydroxychloroquine and COVID. And 2 things we tell students to do are you can Google for fact checks to see if a fact checker has done this work already. I was surprised when I started doing this work with students a few years ago, they hadn't heard of like any of these fact checking sites. So I think it's really important to introduce students to these. And what's great about fact checking sites is they lay out exactly how they find the information. So you can like read through and see if you agree with the process that they took. And then also Googling for trusted coverage. So trusted news organizations, trusted, in me and Amelia's case, they found Johns Hopkins to be a more trustworthy source because it's a reputable medical source for this topic. And then I can just show you how that would look in the browser. If we're gonna look for COVID, hydroxychloroquine, and we could just do that. Actually, sometimes it's helpful to like search the specific term. In the tweet that they found, it was that there's mountains of evidence for hydroxychloroquine in COVID. And this is an interesting search. Maybe if I added COVID, this wouldn't show up. But the first result is this one. There's a mountain of evidence that hydroxychloroquine is, and I haven't clicked on it, but this is where your 3 dots, I think, can be really helpful. No Wikipedia information shows up for this source, which doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it does mean that it's not like well-known or established enough to have a Wikipedia site, which tells you like, it looks like it's new, April 2020. Again, doesn't mean it's wrong, but you know, this isn't like an established like newspaper source that people are using. So you could go down and see, basically you're scanning your sources to look for things that you already know and trust, or you're using this to learn more about the sources. So you could learn more about nature and read about that. NBC News telling us something about COVID patients, etc. And we could put in fact check here, or we could put in a specific name of a fact checker that we use, and we get a fact check from AP News, factcheck.org. So these are all sources that we could read through and see what are they saying about this thing that Sky News is talking about. So I'm going to send you off to do the same thing. And maybe I'll give you a little less than 2 minutes this time. So now I want you to look at the claim. So use Google or your search engine of choice. And what can you find out about that claim that children are 107 times more likely to die from the vaccine than from COVID? And I'm interested in what you learn and what sources you learned it from. So again, I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to do 1.5 minutes this time.
Liz, we should have some Jeopardy music next time or something here.
I'm on mute. Okay, there we go. Yeah, reputable sources debunk the claim. Was anyone able in that short amount of time to find out where they got this number from? For search Pants on Fire, yeah. And if not, that's okay, because I know sometimes it's pretty easy to figure out like true or false, and then it takes a little more time to kind of read through and see like why is this true or false? And I'm just going to show you here. This is on, let's see. Let me just take this out of context tweet. I'm going to take that right there. And since I have looked at this before, let's see, I think Reuters had a pretty good explanation of what happened, which was so as evidence for the one, basically they said, well, CDC data from VAERS says there's 1 in 1,000 deaths of children. They referred Reuters to 2 reports from VAERS that's were 2 child deaths, and they say both reports were made prior to March 31st and May 25th, which were the dates that the clinical trials started with children. So we know that they were made up because children weren't even getting the vaccine at the point that those reports were put into VAERS, which, if you don't know, is a vaccine. You can go claim vaccine injury on that site, but anyone can put anything in there. People go in there and say they got superpowers from the vaccine. So you can't just trust that data without additional verification. All right, great. So the last thing I'm going to say here is that this comes from Jennifer Lagarde and Darren Hudgens, who are other excellent resources in this area. They just came out with a new book, Developing Digital Detectives, that I highly recommend. And they make the point that we really need to think about what type of examples we're using in our classroom with students, because generally, and Sean and I are guilty of this, we're using like laptop examples and how things look on a computer browser. And then students leave the classroom and they're on their phones and things look different. Like the source is in a different place, the date is in a different place, the link to get to the full article is in a different place. So just thinking about that when we're creating activities for class, that we're giving students skills that they can use outside of class when they're on their phone, not on like their school laptop. All right, and our all the SIFT stuff we just showed you, there are some ready-made lessons for that are available through Control F. They have activities and they have videos, short videos from Mike Caulfield and from a BuzzFeed news reporter that you can show to students to teach these skills. And we have a bunch of other resources. We have a toolkit that we've created that we're going to drop the link in the chat.
There it is.
You got it. Great. And I'll just kind of show you, this is a toolkit for if you want to have a Miss Info Day Junior event, what you need to do that. And also, if you're like, man, I don't know if I can swing an event, but I really want to teach my students these skills anyway, we have grouped what we feel like are some of the best resources out there right now. And what I want to just note about this is that it's kind of a lot. So if you're like, wow, this is great, but kind of overwhelming, please feel free to reach out to me to kind of talk through like, here's what I'm doing in class already. And like, here's what I want to do and what are the best resources for that. I had a meeting with a teacher where we did that last week, and it was great. I learned from her about things she was doing I didn't know about, and we were able to kind of create like a unit plan basically that would work for her students. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes, so contact us at tipteachers@gmail.com. And we also have a website, tipteachers.net. And you are all invited. Like I said, we are recruiting you to join in this fight. You are all invited to our next TIP meeting, which will be December 6th. We're excited to welcome Mr. Frank Baker. Mr. Baker is a media literacy expert and specialist, and he teaches workshops throughout the country. He's joining us in from South Carolina. So hope that you will be able to come and join us. And please reach out to Liz and I, tipteachers@gmail.com. We really, really want to support you in doing this work because we think it is so very important. All right. Thank you for the opportunity, WSCSS. Really appreciate it.
No, we want to thank you, Sean and Liz. We so appreciate you just sort of making this something that we can plug and take into our classrooms and for our students to then become experts to their families and other connections. That's an awesome concept. Folks, we do have just a moment here. I just want to make sure that you know, if you are wanting to continue the discussion, there is a platform that OER has set up to basically sort of be able to post and kind of exchange ideas and thoughts and comments. And Sarah has put that onto the chat if you'd like to continue that conversation. If there is a burning question or two, feel free to take a moment to ask that in the chat, and Sean and Liz could perhaps field that. Give folks just a moment to catch up with you. I am going to go ahead and post for you what is next. So at 11 o'clock, we were going to touch base here. Leslie James will be on. I'm sorry, I just moved everything up on the chat. But this is just a preview of this session for any of you who are thinking about applying some of this, but worried about the pushback piece Gordon just asked. I think Leslie will very directly address that issue of what do you do when students and or parents or community push back on some of this some of the teaching here as well. And so I think some of the obstacles you face, we want to make sure that we address those too are likely to face. I want to, actually, maybe Sean and Liz, do you want to address from Gordon the pushback question? Have you had any, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I have not had any so far, but I do, we are very mindful that some folks feel that they are being picked on if they are being called out for spreading misinformation, right? And I believe we do have resources, and I know that Jevon's site has some resources like how to tactfully engage with someone who is falling for misinformation or spreading misinformation. I am in, Ballard is, you know, pretty affluent, pretty blue part of Seattle. So I have not had a lot of that, but I do need to check my kids when like we saw in the video, oh, this is from a conservative website. Well, just because it's from a conservative website does not mean we automatically throw it out. We just add it to the filter, right? We add it to the filter. We know who these groups are or what this audience is and who they cater to and what kind of information they're going to put out there for their audience. I think that's a super, super powerful thing. But no, I have not, and yet, maybe it's in the mail, I have not yet had any attacks from parents or people outside. And I really think at the end of the day, you know, a fact is a fact. And if your ideology or movement is dependent on non-truths, that's not on me. That's not on me, right? And facts are facts and opinions are opinions, and really teaching students to differentiate the two is really at the core of this work. Liz, do you want to add anything to that?
I just want to add that I put in the chat the link to the Snopes archive. They break down their archive by subject. So like you can go find misinformation examples on food or cars or technology. If you're like, I cannot touch the like more controversial political stuff, like people will come after me. You can do that if that's a worry of yours, or you can start there. That's because sometimes it's like you can start there and then kind of work your way into the stuff that's more emotional, because information is super emotional. So yeah, need to be aware of that. And we try to help students like at least recognize that with the confirmation bias lessons. And I saw someone talking about elementary lessons, and I'm going to find, there's not as much out there, but there are some things, and I've created a document of the things I know about. So I'm going to go try to find that right now and link it.
Thank you, Liz. There is one last quick question in our Q&A pod I want to see if we have a moment to address, but how do you respond to the emotional responses of starting this work initially with students? It was asked by Liliana.
Emotional responses, well, I felt that my kids were pretty excited about it, and that it's something that we're talking about, something that they use day to day, right? We're not talking about the Kansas-Nebraska Act here. We're not talking about some kind of thing that feels a million years away, right? And we're feeling it's something that is happening right now. And what I tell my kids and how I frame this to my kids is that they are doing community service here by educating their parents and grandparents. And if you want to say, we got to go out and educate the boomers because they're out there spreading misinformation, that kind of tends to get the students fired up a little bit too. And it's really not on the boomers, right? No one taught any of us how to do this stuff. This is all brand new. This is all brand new. So we all need to give ourselves some grace. And I think that we have, in many ways, from the jump on this, there's this thought that kids are digital natives and they will naturally take to this and everything will be wonderful and utopian. And we've seen that utopian vision of the internet that we got is not really panning out. It's getting looking kind of dystopian. So what we can do about that is just to educate our students to know who they are and what they believe in, know what these platforms are and what their motivations are, and then juxtapose those things together as they engage in online spaces. And I think that's really at the core of what we're doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sean and Liz. Appreciate your time, your expertise, and all of the resources you provided for us. We want to head into break, folks. I do want to make sure you do get a fair amount of break time because I know this has been a long morning. So how about we get started at 11:02 with Leslie James to talk a little bit about the challenges of teaching about misinformation. Thank you much, folks. We'll see you back at 11:02.
The